Vi fortsätter eftermiddagen i spåret artificiell intelligens. Roligt så. I don't know how many of you that are into Bitcoin or other cryptocurrency, but I guess maybe a few of you anyway. And we all know that mining these assets has been trending for quite a while now. And what we also know, but I guess people outside this room might not be as aware of, is that the cryptojacking attacks are also trending. And that is because crunching numbers is the way to create a profit nowadays in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. But we have the solution here, or at least we have the expert. Eward, you've traveled from Amsterdam to show us with your 20 years of experience in all fields and all continents of the world. So please welcome, tell us all about artificial intelligence and cryptocurrency.
Hello. How was lunch? Mine was pretty good. I had lux. It was pretty decent. It's better than we do it in Amsterdam, I can assure you. So I wanted to share a little bit about what I learned this summer. This summer, I was sitting in my home with my wife and my son, and it was awesome, but it was very boring because we just enjoyed each other's company. We didn't do much else. Why was that? The year before that, in 2017, in May we had the WannaCry attacks. In June we had NotPetya attacks. Then it was July and it was summer for everyone except for people in InfoSec like me. Now this year was completely different. And what I want to share to you is I had enough time to ponder on this, and I think that we see a new class of threats coming up. And I saw that over this summer in the course of the lousiest amateuristic attack I ever saw. And I'm going to share a little bit of that with you as well. So, my name is Eward Dreihus, Chief Research Officer at SecureLink. It's my job to share some of the trends and threats that we investigate in 4 continents. First of all, let's again rehash how we got here. So criminals innovated this entire field of cyber threats. They started doing this, and they started doing this back in 2006 in Russia, where Yevgeny Bogachev started creating malware attacking banks. Others followed his lead, and they joined in, and they created this ecosystem, started competing for shares, and they did very well for themselves. They built organizations, then moving their organizations from file-based malware to malware as a service and crimeware as a service. And in 2013, that Bogachev guy said, listen, I'm tired of attacking all those banks. I need to leverage my botnets better. I want to make a buck on every single infected IP address. And hence he came up with the rehashed idea of crypto ransomware. CryptoLocker was the first crypto ransomware, and it made a significant difference because up till then, the risk was solely for banks. And after that point, it was everyone's risk because we could all get infected with crypto ransomware. Then, going further, after that, they went further and they created this ecosystem where they infected first and asked questions later. So they infected us without understanding what they could do with us, but choosing their attack type based on what they saw there. This is what criminals started collaborating with spies. They started collaborating with nation states, started splitting up specialist groups, doing big data on the infected machines and sharing those findings with specialist groups taking over the actual attack. So the access to the bot became more important than what you actually did with that. Going further, back in 2017, so 1 year later, that was when the WannaCry and NotPetya hit, and we then learned that these tools that they innovated could be used for destruction as well. It seemed as if they didn't want to make any money using these attacks, and in fact we now know they didn't. These attacks were being repurposed for destruction purposes only. And that's how horrible it was when it became this super, super boring summer of 2018. So let me tell you what my July looks like. This is the first real criminal attack that we saw. And at first we were very excited because we saw Locky. And Locky was quite a notorious attack back in the day. You know, Locky was one of the crypto ransomwares that was dropped by pretty much every bot there out there, including Dreihus, which was one of the successors to Game Over Zeus. And when we saw Locky ransom nodes, we saw Locky file extensions in the infected machines. So we started investigating immediately. Could this be the big Locky returning with a new iteration? But it wasn't. It was a super crappy piece of malware. It was written in Python by supposedly someone that was, I guess he's French, and he actually added the interpreter to the malware and signed a whole bunch with a certificate stolen from a bankrupt UK company called La Creme. And that was July. Quite different than the year before. So I started to ask myself the question, are these super crappy attacks, is this something we're going to see? Are criminals splitting up in, let's say, the rookies and the veterans? And if they do, what does that mean for us? And the answer for me came a month later. Then moving on, obviously, criminals are not the only threats that we have nowadays, right? So nation states, do we run for cover, shrug our shoulders? What should we, as companies, do with the knowledge that they're out there? Attacks that have high impact and a very, very low rarity or frequency. And finally, as we repurpose our technology and we're dealing with these different threat and risk types, can we catch the same with the one technology? Can we catch the rookie criminals, the veteran criminals, and the nation states? Or should we do something else? So those are some of the questions that I started to ask myself. And the first answer might lie into this report from the FBI. These are the 2017 numbers and losses due to online attacks. And as you can see, well, let me help you here. This is where ransomware is. It's the number 25 money maker for criminals, right? So it doesn't include collateral damage. You know, when you infect a machine and the files are lost and you don't pay, you don't get them back, you know, your loss is that the files are gone, right? So only about 1, 2, 3, a few % of the victims pay up. Criminals have dashboards where they actually, you know, like a sales interface, they see the conversion rate. And if you have a conversion rate of 10%, that is considered to be super high in the criminal underground. So ransomware is not the criminal moneymaker people tended to think. As a matter of fact, if we look at the top 10, so that's the left row here, pretty much 8 out of 10 are all about one thing and one thing only, social engineering. It's messing with the mind, no 0 days, no hacking, no exploits. They're just tricking us to click something and then we run it on our desktops. So, you know, as ransomware is obviously something that makes a lot of people angry. Because if only, let's say, 2% of the people pay, 98% will be left with damages and operational losses. So, if you make a lot of people angry, then it introduces risk for you. If the yields are low, then you're now looking at a high-risk, low-yield business model. And guess who does that? Rookies. That's not what veterans do. So, and obviously, it didn't help that WannaCry and NotPetya came up. Because these particularly malwares, they didn't even have the mechanisms built in for victims to get their files back. It was not there. The interface was not there. So they couldn't give us the files back even if we wanted to. Now, that said, people started to understand, hey, wait a minute, we really can't trust these criminals anymore. And that kind of killed that business model for them. So high risk, low yield, rookie criminals. A lot of work, ransomware. You need to interact with your victims. You can automate that. You know, like Bogachev did with CryptoLocker. He was the Steve Jobs of cybercrime, I kid you not. But Most do it with a chat box or build some kind of an onion website where you need to enter a unique ID, and it's horrendous. It's a lot of work. Most people cannot buy Bitcoins even if they wanted to. If you infect any of my family members, except for me, they won't know how to buy a Bitcoin. So they can't pay you. So it's a horrendous business model. But there's other ways of making Bitcoins than with ransomware, because there's mining. And mining is awesome, because mining is the process of keeping those electronic currency networks alive, guaranteeing the integrity of the transactions. Requires a lot of calculation, as you know. Now, right now, there's Chinese mining farms high in the mountains where it's super cold. They're the only ones who are actually making a little bit of Bitcoin money using mining. So they turn to something else. It's Monero. For all practical purposes, Monero is just a new sort of Bitcoin, a little bit more anonymous even, which is why it fits their money laundering purposes better than Bitcoin as well. And indeed, in the beginning of this year, in our cyber defense centers, we saw that the crypto jacking attacks, so botnets repurposed for misusing our CPUs, were overtaking ransomware attacks by storm. So nowadays, if you read a security report, you will find that everyone says that. I even, with my fantastic interpretation of the Swedish language, heard the previous speaker talk about this for a little bit. So cryptojacking for sure is a thing. But is that really what's happening? Because this graph was created in April. And from June on, we saw a definite flatline back in cryptojacking, going down again, and ransomware is going up again. What are these rookies doing? Because whatever it is, they're not making a lot of money with these cryptojacking attacks as well. The risk is lower, but the yield is also lower. So what are they doing? I don't know. We're watching this space and tracking it for you. Whichever it is, rookie criminals do have access to our networks. They have the ability to destroy some stuff or to take over our CPUs, and that's not what you want to, whichever it is. But I know for a fact, being in this space for 20 years, as was announced, there's good criminals as well. There's veteran criminals as well. You know, there's the likes of Bogachev, and he had something like 50 team members back in the day when they called themselves the business club and robbed banks blind all over the world. So what's happened to those 49, right? And we know now, and the answer came to me in August, when we got a phone call and our emergency response team was sent to a very small Central European country, and they went to an all-out ransomware outbreak. And what I found was this. The criminals had been in that network for months, but only recently had they sprung the trap. So what happened? They searched for clues and found answers in the fact that these criminals seem to have been looking for value for weeks or even months. And this is something that we have seen consistently over the last few years as well, that criminals use more bespoke hacking efforts. You know, an example is the hotel in Austria, where criminals found the key computer, you know, creating those keys to open your door. Apparently they locked it down, and there were 200 people with ski boots standing in the lobby who couldn't get in their rooms anymore. And the management saw no other option than to pay up. It's extortion. It's a different kind of extortion. Criminals love extortion. And obviously we have the Anunet group, who in the old days used the same kind of, they had access first, the first group to actually hack banks, go into ATM networks, do ATM jackpotting, and go into POS networks, infect point-of-sale systems and steal credit cards. Those kinds of ill stuff came from the same kind of behavior that criminals now go into your network quietly and stay hidden, like spies, doing lateral movement and finding the value. But what happens if you don't find the value? You search and you search and you search. It makes you angry. All that effort for nothing. Well, then we spring plan B, and this is what happened in our customer. You know, you destroy all the online backups that you can find. And this is where our customer learned a very important lesson. You do offline backups. offline backups. You do those too. Because if you don't, you will find yourself in a situation that you will now be negotiating with criminals for the very existence of your company. And that was the situation where they were in. They had no backups, they had no future, and every day they were getting a little bit more bankrupt. Now, up till that day, I would always say, listen, it's a very easy principle. If you get scammed, if you get extorted by criminals, don't pay them. Very easy, because criminals are like seagulls. You know, when you pay them, if you give them a little chip, they will come back with all their friends and crap on your shoulders. Right? So you don't do that. But if you don't do that, and it means you die, right, sometimes you must. And I know a respectable company who says, sometimes you do need to do that negotiation. And some other companies have actually Bitcoin wallets that are prepped for this kind of stuff. But it's not good. You know, we should prevent them coming in from the beginning. And this is the extra risk, that the criminal risk that was there, the old botnet infection, malware. We now have the rookie criminals that can wreak a little bit of mess. And we have the veteran criminals. And the veteran criminals own our networks, do lateral movements, we're trained as spies. They sweep their log files as if they were trained as spies, and they go in, find the value, and if they don't find value, they're going to extort you for everything you got. Now, obviously, these two types of criminal organizations, not the only threats we have, do we? There's nation states too. And that's what we learned with WannaCry, NotPetya. Hey, wait a minute. This stuff might be relevant for us as well. And that's why I show this little picture. I don't know if you followed the news, but any one of you recognize these two gentlemen? You know who they are? Yes, it is. It's a shot from a Salisbury coffee shop or something. And these two gentlemen are Russian tourists. They came there to visit the cathedral. And when they were actually apprehended by the Dutch government and kicked out of the country, put on a plane back to Russia, they then gave an interview on RT that they were actually visiting Salisbury as tourists. And they even told everything they knew, they read on Wikipedia about the cathedral, including the height, 117 meters, when it was built, and how many tons of bricks there were in there. It was super credible if you read Wikipedia out loud on rt.com. The relevance, of course, is that these are the gentlemen that are allegedly working for the GRU, allegedly the gentleman who poisoned Skripal and his daughter Julia. Now, why is that relevant? Why is that relevant in cyber? Well, because we've learned, already know, that the NSA tool Eternal Blue was stolen by shadow brokers. It's now in every single piece of self-respecting malware, including WannaCry, including NotPetya, but also including Olympic Destroyer. Olympic Destroyer attacked the Olympic Games in South Korea, but wasn't gone then. It stuck around. And when it came back in June, researchers saw that they were targeting chemical threat prevention laboratories, including in Switzerland and the Netherlands, where these gentlemen all had been. What were these threat prevention laboratories investigating in? Novichok. What was the poison used for these poisonings? You guessed it. So this is just, you know, this is not proof that this is all connected, but this is just the facts what's happened. And to say that geopolitics is not the biggest driver for anything that happens in cyber, including the existence of a botnet such as Olympic Destroyer, is just crazy. All of this stuff is connected, and all of this stuff is driven by geopolitics. And even if you look at the old school frauds, the criminals that stole the money from the banks had already been given, let's say, permission by their leaders to steal as much money. As long as they didn't target Russia, they could keep the profits without paying taxes. You know, those things were being said. So, this is a quick top 5. What do you think Russia has 2 of? Iran 2, North Korea, Vietnam 1, and China 11. It's APTs, advanced persistent threats. So out of the, let's say, the 38 that are numbered, 20 of them today are known. And this is one thing that we sometimes tend to forget. If we're talking APTs, we're thinking Russia, we're thinking North Korea, because they're so blatantly out there. But China has 11. APT 1, 3, 5, 10, 11, and 12 are all Chinese, and they're all cyber espionage. They have been at this game for a long time, doing different things. So it would be a little bit unfair to say that Russia and North Korea would be the... As a matter of fact, North Korea has just recently added as an APT number, you know, with Lazarus and all that stuff, and WannaCry. So they just entered that top 5 recently. But geopolitics is driving risk through the ceiling because it enters a very, very new type event that we as organizations need to take into account, is something that will not happen a lot. But if it happens, you have a very, very good risk of being bankrupt, or at very least impacting your year numbers. And this is obviously driven from the fact that these geopolitics, have you noticed stuff becoming a little bit more tense lately? Trade wars, accusations left and right, the US doing muscle talk and doing muscle things. You know, this is of course driven by peace fleeing from the planet. The US, by the way, has the largest cyber budget in the world. You know, they have about 10,000 cyber soldiers. For comparison, I live in the Netherlands. We're very good at building dikes, and we have 80 cyber soldiers. So that's the comparison. Maybe the only cyber army that's bigger might be North Korea. But you know, I wouldn't know, because what do you do with 60 million people that all answer to one leader? I would put 1 million of them in underground bunkers and have them taught cyber. That's what I would do as a dictator. Might be bigger, we just don't know. And these dynamics are driving all of these risks and driving all of these attacks, becoming more relevant for us as individuals, as citizens, politics, but also as businesses. Now, if you talk APTs, people will say, APTs, I'm not interesting, am I? And I say, you're right. You're not a target. Yeah? Maersk was not a target when NotPetya hit. Ukraine was a target. And the Medoc company that was patient zero was actually supplying services to Maersk and everyone else that did business with the Ukraine. Maersk was collateral damage. Like with ransomware, collateral damage is a serious risk today. So it's no good to think in your risk assessment, I have no beef with nation states, because that's not the way it works. Now, collateral damage is what you might be. And the 300 million that was reported by Maersk and some other companies out there, this was billions of losses. And that little botnet had only about 20,000 of infections. So that's how big that damage was. So let me graph this in a C-level format for you. So you have stuff that doesn't happen a lot, and you have stuff that happens a lot. Oh, you know what? Wait a minute. I can do better. I can make this a little bit more interesting. This used to be our risk. We had only criminal risk. It would go up and down, a new attack. Then there would be criminals that were a little bit more professional. We were at risk of losing a little bit more, and life was so fantastic and easy. And this was just 5 years ago. Maybe the seagull of espionage came by every now and then. Maybe the octopus of activism. We had a little DDoS to our systems. But hey, oh, next day we would be up and running again. But now we have the deadly nation-state cliffs to deal with. So any executive today that's budgeting their cyber defenses, this is their risk graph. And defining where you want to be is more difficult than ever, because it's super, super easy to burn a lot of money on being on the top of the mountain, while in reality you just want to skim the waves. And knowing what your risk appetite is, that's actually one of the more difficult things to do. So, some light tea leaf reading. You know, we had viruses in the old days. We did our innovations with AV. Then the criminal ecosystem, the banks responded. We had big data analytics. We could all use that stuff for ourselves. Then activism, nation states, and that's where we are today, fake news. We're responding with the next-gen products, AI and machine learning, and we need all of that stuff. But the thing is, the more difficult and the more complex and rare and impactful the attacks are going to be, the more data we need to process in order to defend ourselves against this. And the more data we need to generate, the more data we need to handle. Our processes get bigger, shocks get bigger, we need to hire people. And that's the most scarce capital in our industry. It's the people doing this. So how do you build those defenses in a way that you can actually man them with your people, that is economic and affordable? Next generation, my prediction, before they will deploy AI themselves, the bad guys, they will go into the IoT. Now they're gonna, if you ransom pictures of my son, I pay 1,000 kroner for that. But if you ransom the safety of my son, I'm gonna pay everything I have. You know, I see opportunity here, and we're not doing enough to defend ourselves against all of this rampant machine stuff in our networks. So, the cyber tech focus, if we evolve with our responses from signatures to rules, machine learning, AI, we're going to generate more data. We don't have enough people to handle that data, and that's where we need to respond, because it's about people and process first, and then about technology. And those are the challenges. Where do we want to draw the line? How much of this stuff do we want to actually detect, and how much do we want to throw into process? Do we need to keep an eye on the inside only or to the outside as well? Who's going to tell us what happens next? And so on. And tech evolves. Tech is the least of our problem. Tech is fantastic. It's never been better. Talk to all of these people here. They're right. Their tech does amazing stuff, but it generates data, and you need to handle that. And that's what we need to do. How to manage your infrastructure, how to do it, how to staff your SOC, those are, of course, questions that SecureLink can help you with. We would be very happy to talk to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Before you run off and we run off, I just want to know these threats that you talked about, and who's to blame for them, except for the criminals? Who can we call up and say, hey, why did you create this miserable situation?
Well, yeah, so
the companies or
the US government doesn't escape the blame. They created Eternal Blue, for example. And Eternal Blue is now the basis of a lot of our attacks. But to say that the US is responsible is, of course, it's not quite right. You know, it's like I said, it's the dynamics of geopolitics, and it's always been the fact that dictators have no objections if their citizens go ahead and rob their enemies. So cybercrime has always been, in a sense, has been geopolitical already. But as tensions are increasing, you know, I suspect that the attack impact might increase as well. So it's geopolitics. People should hug each other a little bit more.
Exactly. Let's do that. Thank you so much.